Hello everyone and welcome back to this channel. In our previous video, we discussed thorium, the god of thunder, a 14 billionaire battery locked in the sands of our beaches. We saw how its unique, fertile properties make it the ultimate fuel for human civilization. But as we established, thorium is a wet log. It won't burn on its own. Today, we look at the spark. On April 6, 2026, the world watched as India's prototype fast breeder reactor at Kalapakkam achieved criticality using uranium-plutonium mixed oxide fuel and a blanket of uranium-238. This machine is officially operationalizing stage 2 of a mission designed nearly 70 years ago. But how did a newly independent, resource-constrained nation in the 1950s develop a plan so advanced that the rest of the world is only now catching up? To understand the breakthrough at Kalapakkam, we have to look at the inception. We have to look at the man who saw 2026 back in the 1954, Dr. Homi Jahangir Bhabha. But before we can appreciate his genius, we have to understand the standard engine. We need to look at how a normal uranium reactor works. The stage 1 machines that have powered India for decades, so we can see exactly what the beast at Kalapakkam is meant to replace. Dr. Homi Bhabha was not just a scientist, he was a force of nature. Born into a prominent family in Mumbai, he was a true polymath. Classically trained violinist, an accomplished painter, and a world-class theoretical physicist. While at Cambridge in the 1930s, Dr. Bhabha worked alongside the giants of that era, Niels Bohr, James Chadwick, and Paul Dirac. He was at the epicenter of the golden age of physics, even discovering the Bhabha scattering process in electron-positron physics. But in the 1939, while Dr. Bhabha was on a holiday in India, World War II broke out. He didn't return to the UK. He stayed to build a scientific infrastructure for a nation that wasn't even free yet. In 1944, 3 years before Indian independence, Bhabha wrote a visionary letter to the Sir Dorabji Tata Trust. He proposed an institution that would train the future experts of a nuclear-powered India. He realized a fundamental truth: energy is sovereignty. He famously said that no power is more expensive than no power. He knew that for India to be truly independent, its heart, its power grid must belong to its own soil. This led to the creation of the TIFR and eventually the Atomic Energy Commission. When Bhabha surveyed India's resources, he realized he was playing a difficult game of chess. Most nuclear reactors in the 1950s and even today run on uranium-235. But uranium-235 is rare. It makes up only 0.7% of all natural uranium. India held less than 2% of the world's uranium reserves. If Bhabha followed the American or Soviet path of enriched uranium reactors, India would be forever dependent on foreign imports. It would be a pawn between superpowers. However, Bhabha knew India held an ace in the hole: 25% of the world's thorium. But the problem is that thorium is fertile, not fissile. It's like having a warehouse full of high-octane fuel, but no energy to burn it and no match to light it. To solve this, Bhabha designed the 3-stage nuclear power program. It wasn't a project, it was a century-long relay race, where the waste of one stage becomes the fuel for the next. Here, the stage 1 is to burn all natural uranium to produce electricity and harvest plutonium-239. The stage 2 is to use that plutonium in a fast breeder reactor like Kalapakkam to breed more plutonium and eventually uranium 233. Finally, the third stage is to use thorium in dedicated reactors for infinite power. To appreciate the jump to the beast, we have to master the mechanics of Stage 1. India's Stage 1 is built on the PHWR, the pressurized heavy water reactor. Why? Because Dr. Bhabha was a master of efficiency. Most reactors require enriched uranium, which is like refining salt from seawater. It requires massive amount of energy and money. The PHWR allows you to use natural uranium straight from the ground. But to make this standard engine work, you have to manage a very delicate neutron economy. Every nuclear reactor has four main pillars: the fuel, the moderator, the coolant, and the control. Let's talk about them in detail. The first pillar is the fuel, usually uranium-235 and uranium-238. In a stage 1 reactor, the fuel bundles are filled with natural uranium pellets. And remember, only 0.7% of this is uranium-235 that wants to split. The other 99.3% is uranium-238, which is like a rock. It doesn't want to burn. This means our neutrons have to work extra hard to find a target. The second pillar is the moderator. When a uranium-235 atom fissions, it shoots out neutrons at fast speeds, about 10% the speed of light. Paradoxically, these are too fast to hit other atoms. They zip right past. We can see it like this. Imagine trying to catch a bullet with your bare hands. It's impossible. But if you fire that bullet into a deep swimming pool, the water slows down that bullet until it's lost all its momentum and is sinking. Now you can catch it easily. In stage 1, we use heavy water as our swimming pool. It slows the fast neutrons down to thermal speeds so that they can be captured by the tiny 0.7% of uranium-235. Without the moderator, a stage 1 reactor simply won't work. The third pillar is the coolant. As the atoms split, they generate massive heat. We use more heavy water to circulate through the pressure tubes and carry that heat away. It travels to a heat exchanger, boils normal water into steam, and spins a turbine. This is the tea kettle phase of the reactor. The fourth pillar is control. To make sure the chain reaction doesn't go too fast, we use control rods made of boron or cadmium. These are neutron sponges. If the heart rate of the reactor gets too high, you drop the rods in. They soak up the excess neutrons and the fire settles down. Now, here is why Dr. Bhabha's inception was so brilliant. While stage 1 is making electricity by burning that 0.7% of uranium-235, it is also performing a secret alchemy. The useless uranium-238, the 99.3%, is sitting in the core, being showered with neutrons. When a uranium-238 atom swallows a neutron, it doesn't split. Instead, it transmutes. Through a two-step process of beta decay, it becomes plutonium-239. Think of it like this, that you are burning wood to stay warm. But as the wood turns to ash, that ash slowly transforms into high-grade charcoal. In Bhabha's plan, stage 1 is not just a power plant, it's a plutonium factory. We burn the small amount of uranium we have to manufacture the plutonium we need to start stage 2. This was the only way to bridge the gap between India's uranium poverty and its thorium wealth. Logically, Dr. Bhabha's plan was perfect, but it faced an existential threat: global politics. After India's nuclear tests in 1974 and 1998, the international community responded with a technology blockade. The Nuclear Suppliers Group was formed specifically to ensure India couldn't buy nuclear fuel, specialized alloys, or even high-end sensors. The world wanted to freeze India in stage 1. They figured if India couldn't get more uranium, then the relay race would stop. But Dr. Bhabha had built a culture of resilience. Led by successors like Dr. Vikram Sarabhai and Dr. Raja Ramanna, India's scientists went entirely indigenous. It was as if the world told India it couldn't buy a car, so India decided to build the engine, the tires, and the fuel from scratch, using only what was available in its own backyard. They built their own supercomputers to simulate reactor cores. They invented their own zirconium alloys for fuel cladding. This isolation didn't stop the plan, it made it indestructible. Because India built every pump and every line of code themselves, no foreign power can ever turn off India's path to stage 3. Dr. Homi Bhabha was a man who moved too fast for the global status quo. By the mid-1960s, he had openly stated that if the government gave the green light, India could produce a nuclear device in just 18 months. He was about to turn a third world nation into a nuclear-armed power. Then came January 1966, the darkest month in the history of Indian science. On January 11, Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri died under mysterious circumstances in Tashkent, just after signing a peace treaty with Pakistan. Exactly 13 days later, on January 24, Dr. Homi Bhabha boarded Air India Flight 101, the Kanchenjunga, headed for Vienna. The plane never arrived. It crashed into the heights of Mont Blanc in the French Alps, killing all 117 people on board. The official report cited pilot error, a miscalculation of position, but the timing was too perfect to be ignored. India had lost its political leader and its scientific visionary in less than 2 weeks. For decades, the crash was whispered about as a hit, but in 2008, a bombshell emerged. An alleged interview with a former CIA operative, Robert Crowley, was published in the book Conversations with the Crow. In the transcripts, Crowley allegedly claimed that the CIA had bombed the flight to paralyze India's nuclear program. He reportedly called Dr. Bhabha brilliant but dangerous for the American agenda. Adding fuel to the fire, in 2012, a diplomatic bag belonging to the Indian Ministry of External Affairs was recovered from the melting glaciers of Mont Blanc 46 years after the crash. It was filled with newspapers and calendars from 1966, a haunting reminder of a mission frozen in time. Was it a tragic accident or a decapitation strike by a superpower terrified of an independent India? We may never have the full proof, but Dr. Bhabha's enemies made one fatal mistake. They thought killing the man would kill the mission. They didn't realize that Dr. Bhabha hadn't just left behind a plan. He had left behind a generation of scientists who treated his 3-stage program as a sacred oath. They continued in the shadows through sanctions and poverty until they finally built the machine that Bhabha only saw in his dreams. They built the beast. The relay race has entered its second lap. We understand the standard engine, the PHWR, that uses heavy water to slow down neutrons. It is a reliable commuter car, but the prototype fast breeder reactor at Kalapakkam is not a commuter car. It throws away the moderator. It keeps the neutrons fast. It operates at temperatures that would melt a standard reactor. And instead of using water to cool the core, it uses liquid sodium. In our next video, we are going inside the beast. We will look at the extreme engineering of the PFBR, the physics of liquid metal, and how India is currently breeding plutonium to pave the way for the god of thunder. We will meet in our next video. Until then, stay curious.